What's up, everybody? Merry Acemas. We're finally here at the end of the 12 days of Acemas. And you knew I was going to have something very special for y'all. I hope your holidays have been good. I hope you got everything you wanted under your tree or in your boxes, depending on whatever holiday you're celebrating today. Um, Stockings? Do people still do stocking stuffers? I don't know. I haven't heard that phrase in a while. But today we've got reasons why we need Templar in standard. I just slapped together a little list here. I'm going to go through and read it. I'll probably think of more as we go, but this is something that, I've been kind of stewing on for a while, and I wanted to make sure that when I did this, it wasn't out of malice or vitriol or even sarcasm. I just wanted this to be like a feel good little thing with Templar, and it's taken me longer than I thought to get my feelings in order to make sure that this is not an emotionally driven video. Now it is subjective, this is going to be of course my opinion, but I didn't want to come from a place of longing and desire. So number 1, it's got the perfect symbol identity. Templar is an air, all, and life symbol card. And while symbol identity has never been truly hammered in, it's never been truly objectively followed and adhered to, the air symbol has very much been the card pool clearing symbol, which is represented by the bottom response. With a foundation, your punch attack deals damage, you get to clear it and this card from your card pool. Notably, this is two activations, two triggers or maybe not triggers, but this is two cards cleared from one activation. Not too many cards clear multiple cards. So if you have like a storm count ability, this could add two cards, which would be really cool. Not that anyone ever played this ability before, but it still fits the theme of the air symbol and has a little bit of uniqueness to it. The all symbol, for lack of really having too much identity, has been sort of a toolboxy identity and a card draw identity, which of course every symbol needs card draw, but usually when you have a big drawing effect, or effects that rely on drawing lots of cards, the all symbol is there, and that's something that they've continued to this day and might even be trying to hone in on. And the life symbol, of course, is the gaining health symbol, or in this case, on the sprinting vitality, gain vitality. Um, Again, multiple symbols have gained health for different reasons, but you have a strategy based around it, or an abundance of it, or it simply only does gaining health. That's pretty much always been a life symbol thing. So, for a 3 symbol card to have perfect symbol identity is pretty rare, and I really like it when there is sort of this, I guess, I don't know if it's top down necessarily design, or what they call it in Magic, but in Magic, there's a style of design where you'll have a multicolored card and you try to inject each of the color's identity into different parts of it to make something unique and flavorful, but still adhering to the colors or the symbols in this case on the card. So perfect symbol identity is a a high bar, I think, to make in design. Next up, we have draw 2, gain 2 is fun to say. So this is my opinion. This is subjective. I'm sure it's not great to hear your rival say it, but it's just phonetically kind of fun to say, to the point where people will say breaker 2 as in TOO, as in breaker also for the response. And it leads to a funny little interaction where people are like, wait, I thought it was breaker 1, but you're just saying breaker also. So you say, I'm going to respond with draw 2. But I've always thought that's kind of funny. And then, of course, when it lost breaker, we would say rip breaker 2, which, it never had breaker 2, but we're saying rip breaker also. And I've always thought the phonetics of Templar is kind of funny in that way. It's a defensive piece that is soft control. We don't necessarily want hard control in this game because backswinging is already super powerful. we've seen a little bit of control does go a long way. We did need a little bit of control effects, even from the early days. We've had cancels and sealing cards and losing characters. People like forget Eraserhead. It exists in MHA set one. So a defensive piece set is soft control, I think, is much more preferable in general, and you want to kind of add a lot of these soft pieces together. When I think of hard control, I think of, Cape of No Return, removing attacks. I think of um, Genkai's guidance, not even letting you enter the enhanced step. I even think a little bit of Filled Without. Filled Without's like borderline because it's only one of part of the equation. Obviously it doesn't get rid of the damage, so I could argue that is also soft control, but it's one of the most powerful versions of it. Showdown, target commit to foundation, incredibly stifling in a lot of board states. Breaker one is, pretty soft. Breaker one is I don't know, maybe the softest of the true control abilities. Just -1 to your check, just one little extra resource. It might not even. It's like strictly worse than a defensive stun one. So having soft control pieces is really cool, and this is one of the more dynamic ones. I guess drawing cards on defense can be, pretty difficult to deal with, but I'd still say that random cards off the top, that's pretty soft. And one of the tenets of soft control, in my opinion, is that it doesn't really stop your rival from doing what they want to do. It's not saying no, and so it's less obstructive than airy smiles in that way. We've got airy smiles on air and all, and one of the common complaints I've heard about having Templar back would be that you would combine these two cards to make it like really stifling and difficult to play through. And I don't know if that's really true. Having that many actions in the deck would be really rough. And I feel like if you're looking for true stopping power, Airy Smiles is way more obstructive to the rival's game plan, than Breaker 1, than Templar, than gaining 2 health would be. So Templar does obviously increase your ability to unclunk your hand. It lets you be more aggressive by drawing cards defensively, but it's not as painful to play into as Airy Smile. And, it lets both players play more of the game than other block effects. The more cards you draw, the more health you have, the more universes you get to play. And because it's not, shutting the rival down like a showdown does, or clogging their card pool like a runaway does, or anything like that, it's promoting more playing. It's giving you more health that your rival then can deal in damage. Don't you guys hate it when you just, send a 7 mid for 28 at the rival and they check a 3 turn 2 and the game's already over? Don't you just hate it when you play 5 or 6 attacks in Godzilla on turn 2 because your first 3 attacks gave you momentum and you didn't have to commit a single card until the last 2, and because Godzilla's damage pump is static, it ended up being exact lethal even though he had to be committed. Well, if you just mix in a little Templar block in there, there's a whole nother turn where you get to spend all that momentum you just got with Godzilla. And I think playing more universes is something that is good for the game. We have very interactable in current standard. They've printed so many ways to punish drawing cards at this point. It's making me wonder, A, why we don't see more. And B, if we could find ourselves in a metagame where even attempting to draw cards is seen as a waste of time. Most of them are, void abilities, so it might require like a void centric metagame, which the void symbol's getting a lot of pieces with the KOF challenger decks to make this sealing foundation sort of gimmick a big deal. And if we're sealing a whole bunch of foundations, then drawing cards from your stage won't be that relevant, and having the card draw from hand could be an interesting way to play around that. But there's so many ways cancel draw right now. We got one in Critical Role. We just got Heat Tackle, which granted, you'd have to play it as an attack instead of blocking with it, and blocking with it is really good. So promoting heat tackle to played as a be played as an attack, I think is good for the game in general. But there's a couple others I'm forgetting at this exact moment, but there is definitely ways to cancel draw abilities. There's ways to punish draw abilities. There's ways to cancel actions. You know, Koenma's task is being for, playset being played in Mikasa right now. Yeah, there's you can't play abilities, during certain steps being printed. So Dark Ward, Dark Ward cancels either Breaker or the draw 2 gain 2, which is like really cool that it's not a full complete answer to it. Having Templar's defensive ability split up is actually really interesting in that way. You can team Dr. Ichigaki it, which is kind of like a 1x staple. I already mentioned Keeping Alert. That's the one from Critical Role. But yeah, having like a world where we're playing cards like Keeping Alert, I think we should kind of already be moving there anyways, but I myself cut them. So yeah, I don't know. It's very interactable. Tattered Costume's another one. I'm just gonna keep finding them if I keep thinking about it. But yeah, it's cards. Some of these are cards people are already playing. Some of these are cards that people probably want to play. Being able to shut down Rejuvenating Smash sounds like it would have been really good, right? So why not try to shut down Templar? And it's got more interaction points than a card like Rejuvenating Smash. Templar already served its prison sentence. This is something not a lot of people know about. I mentioned it briefly earlier that Templar lost its breaker. And so it was already not super playable in the current metagame. But when they took the breaker away on one of the reprints, it became absolutely just not worth the time. Like it was also a format that was still holding on to some old powerful cancels. It had a lot of targeted hate pieces being printed for it, and then it also lost breaker. So unlike that whole scenario that I talked about with Dark Ward, now it does have just the gain 2 draw 2. So a singular response cancel does actually nerf it. It does actually completely answer it. So it just made it that much less appealing in a world where it was already getting kind of power creeped out. And granted, we might have actually missed our window for power creep this time around too. Like I said, Area Smiles is like super duper strong, but yeah, Templar has already been punished long enough. It's the least broken of the 4 staple actions. So it's kind of a cycle. It's not quite all 12 symbols life overlaps. But I've always considered this to be sort of like a staple action suite, I guess, where it's revoke, which cancels enhances, out of your league, which cancels responses, stop, which responds to commit characters, and then Templar, which stop responds on block to commit characters, and Templar responds on block to gain health and draw cards and breaker 1. And Showdown might have been in here before stop was printed, but that's a lot more overlap with revoke on evil. So these are kind of the promo actions. These are actions that were reprinted in Blood Omen, and that kind of served as a sort of Red Horizon base set. It didn't have a ton of reprints, I don't think. Like it wasn't like a reprint set the way that Capcom Platinum was. But I do remember definitely thinking like, oh, this is cool that this is one of the older Red Horizon cards. Deliverance might even go in here as well. Deliverance was all death and evil, so it would share 2 symbols, and maybe there's more staple action from Red Horizon than I'm really thinking. But I always thought of these as like the 4 main ones. These are the 4 that were in Blood Omen. I think Stop was first printed in Blood Omen. I don't think it was a reprint. I think that was its first printing, but it immediately became a staple card. Just response remove after you block with it, commit your opponent's character was definitely worthwhile. So of those 4 cards, I think it's the least broken, mostly because revoke and out of your league cancel character abilities. They cancel character responses and character enhances, and stop literally commit to your rival's character on block. Templar does nothing to your opponent's character. Templar does nothing to cancel anything. It's the least offensive of the actions, and it's the only one with an offensive ability. Again, the offensive ability no one plays, but it is promoting aggression more than revoke does. Well, more than stop does, that's for sure. It gains health during the block step, which leads to dramatic damage steps. Templar is one of the most fun cards to play because it really throws the rival's math off. It really makes them consider, they got to cross their T's, dot their I's, stuff like that. Especially if they're playing like a multiple, off zone string and you got to worry about multiple Templars. Um, it leads to different response triggers that you can do. It opens up a whole chain of things. The same way that we've seen cards like loss of consciousness and greater goal and stuff like that. Like the way the death symbol kind of has all these different chain responses opening up. You can kind of get the same thing, but during the block step when you have Templar and life gaining synergies, or potentially you draw other actions. Maybe you can block with Templar, and then you can can't think of anyone right now. I was gonna say Deliverance, but Deliverance has to be an unblocked attack for that very reason. But my point is that there's a lot of different things that can happen during the block step because of windows opening from Templar, and it leads to more interesting and more dramatic steps of the game rather than just is this attack blocked or not? Did we reduce damage or not? It's a high risk, high reward gameplay style. So actions can clunk up your hand a lot. Actions can kind of mess up the consistency of your deck, even when they draw cards. It can be a dead card in hand if your opponent's not attacking you. So it kind of behooves you to play more cards on your turn, to go down to a smaller hand size. And that way, if the opponent doesn't attack you, you can review the Templar, something I don't think you guys would expect me to do, but I have been known to review a Templar here and there. And if they do attack you, then you get to use it and draw the 2 cards. So we talked about how it's the most interactable, of the defensive tricks out there. So if your opponent does cancel it, if the opponent does have an answer for the draw 2 part, then it is a high risk play. But drawing 2 cards, don't get me wrong, drawing 2 and gaining 2 on defense is very strong, especially with the breaker as like the little cherry on top. So I get it, but that is the high reward for taking those risks. And if you don't take those risks, then the card doesn't function properly for you. If you aren't able to leverage that card advantage by playing more cards on your own turn, then the card is not truly doing anything for you. Granted, if you have a bunch of card advantage on your own turn and you get to play a bunch of cards and hold a bunch of cards, and that's, not Templar's fault. I don't think we should blame Templar for being able to set yourself up in such an amazing position before it's even your opponent's turn. So in that respect, Templar, I think it really fits into the kind of risk management gameplay that is core to the universe's experience. Incredibly fair power level. It's basically all I've been saying this whole time. It's one of the most fair cards ever printed that has a powerful, worthwhile effect. The only thing that's really unfair about it is when you draw multiple of it against a discard deck, but also discard decks have targeted snipes that they can start the turn with, and discards also. The only thing that might be more unpleasant than resource denial in this game specifically is is discard, because in this game specifically, more than any others, targeted discard is also, or not even targeted, but just, rival discard, rival hand rip is also debuild. The less cards that I have in my hand, the less cards I get to build if you're doing it on my turn. If you're going to rip my hand up on your turn, then that's less cards I can build because I need to have more cards in hand. This is less cards I can play. So hand destruction, hand rip, however you want to call it, is one of the most toxic, unpleasant, antithetical strategies to universes. Templar not only helps you play against those strategies potentially, but those strategies have innate interactions that help them against Templar. So it's still insanely fair against one of the most unfair strategies that you can possibly have in universes. At this point, I feel like this isn't just like why we need Templar in standard, but why Templar would be the most elegant solution to the most awful problems. I mean, this could help you bounce back against unyielding decks in certain ways. But yeah, this is just one of the most super fair cards. It was never ever ban worthy. I think when it lost Breaker, that wasn't even truly like an intentional nerf. I think they just sent the wrong version to print. They forgot to put Breaker on it and then ran with it as a, specific errata. So it's just always been super fair. Life has 0 on block actions. The life symbol could really use something that, when you block with, it does something. It has like weird attacks that don't really do anything great when you block with it most of the time. Air and all do have airy smiles, and that one does not rotate. So it's going to have that for a little bit longer, but wouldn't hurt to have a different one. Maybe have a little bit of variety in your life, but life has absolutely none right now, and that just feels kind of weird. It feels kind of bad. It feels like it's missing out. So this would fill in a gap that the life symbol has in current standard right now. One of the few really good Red Horizon arts. I'm not the biggest I'm not the biggest Genzuman fan for art, especially with Red Horizon, because it wasn't like an established IP. It seemed like there's a lot of weird similarities amongst cards. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't know if problematic is what I want to use, but I'm not thoroughly excited by a lot of the Red Horizon art. But Templar was one of them that it really was. Granted, this version that I've got on screen here is by far the best. It was foiled. It had so much like enhancement going on in the background, but even the original is like really solid. So this feels like by far the best. Like I can't even. There's nothing really comparable actually in in Red Horizon art. I can't think of any Red Horizon cards that really even come close. I don't know, maybe Engagement Farm, leave one down in the comments below. I feel like anytime Genzuman has like a really interesting like composition, um it's almost always involving like a naked woman, and that kind of like makes it weird to talk about and compliment anyways. 10,000 Souls of Hell was close. I'll say that. I remember that card off the top of my head. But most of the others are like kind of muddy and confused, or has like just a weird posing woman. And then even the ones that aren't that weird, like I don't know, they're not great. This is one of the few good ones. So I don't think that we would keep Red Horizon art on it anyways. So we're getting into that. Yeah, we had so many punch focus sets. The offensive ability could have finally been used. I've talked about no one uses that ability. We probably had more punches printed per set through MHA than any other time in Universe's history. Street Fighter has a lot of ranged kicks as well as the punches. Some versions even have a decent amount of weapons being used, but this was finally the time for an offensive punch deck to get some mileage out of this. The power level was finally reduced down to a point where committing one foundation to clear your card pool was actually super worth it. I don't even think we didn't even really have like combo punches. So it wasn't even like you'd be playing it on a 5 that often. A lot of times in the past, if you wanted to do the Templar offense, you were probably playing punch combos, which means you would only be clearing the second punch, and which, playing it on a 5 instead of a 4, excuse me, with the commit 1 foundation, that's just enough risk. That's just enough to make it so that checking a 3 is that much more punishing. And back in MHA, that 1 foundation difference was bigger than it ever was. So we really had, I don't know, we really had an opportunity to make this one impressive. And yeah, it would have been a perfect reprint in MHA. I think I even did a mock up for it. You've got the all symbol for All Might, who's the big, Templar protecting the children. You've got Air for Bakugo, who, clears the card pool. And then you've got the life symbol for Deku, for gaining health. Because, I mean, at least in the show, he like gets beat up. He beats himself up and then he's got to get healed, right? We had Recovery Girl's Kiss. This would have gone perfect with that. So the symbol identity for them as a trio on Templar would have been absolutely perfect. All Might already had characters, character cards that draw 2 cards. And while Deku never actually ended up with a character that gains health, he's definitely had gaining health like adjacent to him a lot, and he did finally end up with multiple life symbol characters and stuff. So I don't know. This could have been like the perfect blend of like how Bakugo and Midoriya always idolized, their hero All Might, and that's what the Templars were supposed to be, right? Protectors of the pilgrims, their local folk hero types. Um, and yeah, he would have been their protector, and they would have all had all of their themes, all of their symbol identities represented perfectly together. It also would have been a perfect reprint in Critical Role. This is a setting that has magnificent magical warriors who are all manner of holy champions, stuff like that, defenders. There's even a bodyguard, right? Like Beauregard's a bodyguard in it. So there's a lot of potential there. This could have been a Pike card. This could have made Pike like way more exciting to play. Pike could have probably had these symbols. I don't know. One of the cool things, I didn't even mention this. One of the cool things about Templar is it's actually a symbol shifted card. You see Reese on it. Reese has the good symbol instead of the life symbol. He's air all good, and this is air all life. And they did that a lot more back in the day to kind of fill out the set. Was they would shift one symbol away, and that could show a different side of a character's personality or something like that. Pike could have, they probably would have needed like the all symbol or something, which wasn't present in every set. But maybe this could have been like a back page thing that we do to fill out the sets that they might not have, like the way Violent Animus was, right? Violent Animus was like the one of like 2 evil cards in the set, and the other evil card was a reprint. There's no justification for not putting Templar in Critical Role based on available symbols. And having a Pike art with Templar would be so funny because you could like do the reverse, right? Because like Pike's like a halfling or whatever, so the Templar could be smaller than the person this time, but still mighty and like protecting them. How sick would that be? Pike and Grog. Oh my god! And the funny part would be like Pike's like the Templar in this. Oh, dude, there's so much potential. The more I talk about this, the better this idea is. And it would have been a perfect reprint in solo leveling. I mean, the all symbol needs something going on. It's another world where you can rely on character roles, like the way we have roles in video gaming and stuff like that as tanks and protector defender types, right? Um like it just, I don't know, it would have been just a solid fit for anything that's gamified, really. Which it also would have been a perfect reprint in Strive. If you guys have ever seen Order Soul Bad Guy, that Soul Bad Guy when he was a Templar, Kai Kisuke is like a former Templar, and it would have been, it just would have been such a good fit. I don't know, it could have been another one of those things where it's like character like symbol shifted, because I think Kai has air, but that's like the only thing really being shared here. So, um, yeah, I don't know. There's so much that you can do with Strive just because there's so many characters tied to the religious orders. If you really needed that flavor sort of win there, but also like punches are kind of a big thing in Souls repertoire, what with Fafnir and stuff like that. So there's definitely tons of potential for Strive. Strive has the Roman cancel token, and it has all these other action cards that do cool stuff when you block with them, or cool stuff when you have them in your card pool that you want defensively. And it feels like it would have just blended in with the rest of the set really well, and you could definitely make the flavorful ties. Arthur looks badass. Arthur is the name of the blue ghost guy, the Templar guy, the guy in the suit of armor. They call him Arthur. So now you know a little bit of trivia about Templar that it took me, I don't know, maybe like 7 or 8 years to learn that. I think I learned it early and then like forgot it. But most people just call him Templar, but his name is Arthur, and he looks badass. Having your own IP, even if it's not Red Horizon, we could do Templar without specifically Arthur, despite him looking badass, but you'd have to make him look badass. And I don't know, you could maybe even just pluck him out and like leave Reese and the rest of Red Horizon alone, just like port him over and like get rid of everything else. I don't know. But having your own IP is good for creating community. I'm not 100% tied to Red Horizon. I don't mind it. I would really like to see a different artist imagine it. I'm not 100% sure on the problematic parts of Red Horizon outside of the art of the cards. There's definitely some things in the art that I can understand if, we were really trying to go that way with it. But having your own IP for things like Grand Archive or all these other card games coming out allows them a certain level of freedom, even if there's crossovers. It used to be that you'd have like still your mainstream IP and you'd be trying to get crossovers and stuff like that to guest star in your game. And I think having a model like that, which is basically what Magic does now, despite the fact that Magic is trying to sell off its identity as soon as possible. But having your own IP is great for building community because it gives people something to latch on to. I really wish that I could do lore videos, the way that Magic Arcanum tells the story of Magic, and you can reference like characters, relationships, and things like that. You don't really get that in universes. If I wanted to do a universes lore video, it would just be a Attack on Titan lore video. It doesn't really work that way. So having your own IP would open up a lot of content avenues and stuff like that. And it would just give your community something to latch onto and say, this is universes related. This is part of its identity. This is something that is only universes. It's only related to that. And that's something that we don't have. Oh, and it's got insane cosplay potential, kind of going back to Arthur looking badass. Is the suit of armor, I've thought about it before, but I just don't have any expertise or resources with Templar, or with cosplay. But cosplaying Templar would be absolutely phenomenal, dude. Like a giant suit of armor, badass sword, the color scheme, even get everything like glossy. I think that would be super badass. I'd be so down. Insane, insane cosplay potential. And to add to the cosplay potential, you could do a duo cosplay. It's a partner cosplay because you could have Reese. You have the giant suit of armor, and then someone can cosplay Reese, which Reese, admittedly, pretty easy. You just got to get like the sweater and a jacket, which I think at one point they sold the sweater. Someone, I think, made a custom one. Oh, dude, that reminds me. There used to be a dude in the game that everyone referred to as the Reese guy because he had the Reese sweater, and I think he had the jacket. I think he had the combo. And that just makes, that makes like a Reese cosplay like pretty easy, like white wig, you know, jacket, sweater, jeans, gloves, fingerless gloves. Get up in there, dude. Easy partner cosplay. Super cool. Oh, the mid block makes it more reliable than other block triggers. Airy Smiles is a high, Showdown is a high block. People got Roman cancels to change the zone of attacks right now. We probably are going to see low breakers get a little more love because of that. But Templar, good old Templar, reliable Templar is already a mid block. You don't have to do any of the happy chaos gunslinger tricks to block with, whatever zone you're gonna need. You don't have to play and seal everything in your rival's stage to be able to block with this. It's just a mid block, and the mid block makes it not only fair and balanced, but it makes it versatile. It gives it utility. It promotes more partial blocking too, because you can take a little bit of damage. So you can play a mid block in front of this, take half, play the Templar, gain the two. You'll probably take the half again, but that gain two mitigation, is sometimes enough to heal the half that you would take, right? If it's a 4 damage high attack, you're gonna gain two and then take two. So very reliable as a mid block, makes it much more accessible, makes it much more appealing in that way, and it makes it so that something that again I think is going to become very common is Roman cancels changing the zone of attacks, and you're going to want to have a mid block hand trap. It can't kill the rival. Templar is a card that does have an offensive ability, but it itself can't kill the rival, and that's pretty lame. It's pretty lame when cards kill the opponent, because then you're not playing universes anymore. That's what attacks are for. And speaking of attacks, it isn't a 3 check. Having a 3 check super sucks. Having a 5 check, now that's badass. Uh, I I really hate it when people tell me that Rejuve Smash is basically Templar, and it's not, because it's putting a 3 check in my deck. It's not where the space is allocated for that. So, um, I'm a fan of the 5 check version. It's one of the very few cards with 4 different printings to put in a deck. I know some people are gonna be very upset at this. I know some people are gonna be very tilted, but I think having 4 different copies of a card that you're gonna play as a playset in a deck is very funny and very cool. It allows you to recognize which of the cards that are actually performing for you. Like, for example, if you have 2 copies of a card in your deck, and one is the alt art and one is the base art, and you always check the alt art, but you always draw the base art, you know which of them is good. You know which of them is betraying you. And then you can swap that one out. You might think I'm crazy, but I'm not. If you can identify which versions of your cards are betraying you and replace those with the ones that are not, the ones on your bench that are eager and excited for a chance to prove themselves, you're going to see your win rates go up. So having 4 different printings is absolutely a competitive edge. And this is, why I wanted to make sure I had all my thoughts and feelings in order. Is we were told standard Sunset promos would be standard legal, and that was one of the things I was really most excited about at the first ever national Dallas, um, or Pro Hero National, I should say. And it was just a huge bummer that like they changed what standard was after that, and it wasn't even legal at that event. I couldn't even play Templar at the last quote unquote standard event, where every other promo was legal, because of some weird reprinting issue, some weird set mark thing, where this watermark wasn't legal out yet, and the watermark from before wasn't legal again for some reason, even though I could have sworn I guess there was Revoke and Out of Your League promos since then, which they missed Templar because people had stopped playing it because they took away the breaker and everything. And this was supposed to be the return of the true, real Templar, and it wasn't legal. And then we were told it would be legal, and then it wasn't legal, and it just, that schism, that frustration is just really, really tough to deal with and get over. And it's taken me multiple years, and I think I'm finally not super spiteful about it, but at the same time, it would be really nice if that came true. So I was really excited to play with these cards. This promo of Templar has never been standard legal, unfortunately. And in retro, it is, not the most powerful. I just watched on stream me playing Templar in basically a meme deck. Um, it didn't go in either of the other two decks, despite being those symbols. That's something I was saving for this video. Is in that tournament, I played a character with the air symbol, a character with the all symbol, a character with the life symbol. Granted, the Terry deck was primarily earth and not all, but um, Terry 1, it was always kind of a debate of whether you should play Templar or not, and that's a character that doesn't really want to block with action. So the Templars were all in the Morrigan deck. Maybe that's why I kept picking it, because I just wanted to play Templar that much. And even drawing multiple Templar just wasn't that strong in the earliest days of retro. So it's not super playable in retro. I think it would be much more playable in standard without being like offensive to the power level. And it just really sucked to think that I would get to play the card again, be told I wouldn't, but would be able to soon. And then this product just like never came out. So again, I don't think we're gonna get Red Horizon. We'll probably never get, this reprinting again. But we've had so many sets, we've had so many products. I'm not that familiar with Borderlands. I bet there's a character in Borderlands that would fit the role of Templar pretty much exactly. Again, anything that can be gamified, you typically have that like protector role, right? You've usually got characters that fit, the same molds and archetypes. So yeah, being told that it would be legal when it should have already been legal but wasn't legal, and now it's been years since Templar wasn't even fake legal, much less actually legal and standard, has been pretty tough. So hopefully we get a reprint of it, not like a spiritual successor. I don't want a zero diff 5 check action that has a +2 mid block that just has gain 2, draw 2. I don't want a block that has breaker 1 and you can discard a momentum to gain 2 health. I don't want manifest high block gain 2. I want Templar. There's a very good loading ready run pit where, they're talking about like elvish mystics and Land of War elves or whatever, and they're the same mana dork, and why it matters which art it is. And it's one of those things where if you go to, a restaurant, you order a taco and they serve you nachos, would you would you be upset? It's all the same ingredients, they're just arranged in a different way. But what you ordered was a taco, and I think this time I want my taco.